Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 14 of Dirtmasters, the review series evaluating the pros and cons of each real rally car that's featured on Gran Turismo 6. So as you can see, slightly different camera layout this time, mainly due to the fact that you can just see more of the car in the GT Auto setting than you can from the community thing, whatever you call it. So, as you can see in this episode, we're featuring the Mitsubishi Starion, which, due to a typo, was called the Starion. It was supposed to be translated Stallion. Has an interesting look, looks kind of like an Audi Quattro from some angles. And it's kind of a unicorn rally car. It didn't really run for that long in the WRC. It was almost more of a Group B spec vehicle, although it did run in the WRC for a very short time. It's one of the more powerful rally models in the game, also one of the more expensive models at 1.4 million credits. But how does it compare to its rivals? Well, let's go to the track and find out. Now, as we mentioned, the Starion is one of the more powerful rally models on Gran Turismo 6, and because of this it does have very good acceleration, thanks to having almost 600 horsepower. So for acceleration, I am actually going to give this car a strong 5 out of 5 because it is very quick. For low speed handling though, I'm going to have to give it a 3, because although it's not undrivable, it does feel very heavy and there is a lot of understeer. Now you can adjust this, but with the Starion that is always there. That is a characteristic of this car, and it just doesn't really feel that well suited to city tracks. So for city tracks, I'm going to give this car a 3, because it just doesn't feel at home here, and it is significantly slower than many cars that actually have less power. But let's see if it's any better on a twisty country track. Now, on a twisty country track such as this, you do get to use more of the Starion's power. Now, the heaviness of the handling is still very apparent here, but for high speed handling it does definitely feel better than for low speed. So I am going to give it an improvement of 1 to a 4 out of 5 for high speed handling. For top end performance as well, I'm going to give it a 4, because it is pretty quick top end, quicker than most WRC spec models. Overall, for a country track, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5, because it definitely feels better here than on a city track, but it's still definitely not perfect, and it is still slower than you'd expect it to be, really. Now, for its brakes, I'm going to give this car a 4, because the brakes are pretty good. They do quite a good job of scrubbing off its speed and power. So that's it for a country track. Now let's see how it tackles the most important track type of the 4, a dirt track. Now, although its heavy steering does still have a bearing on its dirt driving, the Starion does feel more at home on a dirt track. The handling is much more fluid. You can really get the car to get its back end out around corners, and it does feel much more at home here. Now, it's still far from perfect, and in terms of pure lap times, it falls surprisingly far behind even more basic modern rally cars on every track type, which really surprised me, because I wasn't holding back with this car. It's just slower for some reason. So overall, for dirt tracks, I would like to give it a 5 out of 5, and in terms of the overall package, it's pretty good. But its sheer pace and lap time potential does let it down. So it's only going to be, unfortunately, a 4 out of 5, which is still a respectable rating, but not as high as I would have expected for this car. Now, for drivability, I'm also going to give this car a 4 out of 5, because it's not the easiest of cars to drive, but it's definitely not the hardest either. It takes a little bit of practice to get a feel for this car, but once you do, it is a fairly consistent handling car, even if that consistency isn't necessarily good consistency. So that's it for a dirt track, but can it perform any better on a snow track? Well, let's go to Chamonix to find out. Now, overall, the Starion does feel better on a snow track than it does on a dirt track. There is still heaviness to the steering, and that does hamper your lap times, but it does feel more at home on dirt and snow tracks than it does on tarmac. And of the two, to be honest, I do think it feels better on a snow track than on a dirt track, because although the handling is heavy, you can get much more of a flow going with this car on a snow track than you can on a dirt track. Mainly due to the width of the track and the fact that the sections are more high speed, whereas on a dirt track it's more start-stop kind of performance, and the heaviness of the steering really affects the car more on that track type. Now, unfortunately, it's still not going to get a 5 for snow tracks, and the reason for that is because the handling is still heavy, and because, surprisingly, it is slower than many of the other rally cars in the game, even cars with far less power. Which is a shame, because I was hoping that this car would do really well, because it's quite a cool car. So, that's it for our track-based testing. Perhaps a surprising result for this car. So now let's go back to the garage for a roundup of this car's best and worst overall points. So overall, the Starion has a surprisingly mediocre result. And that's a shame. I was hoping that this car would do much better than that. I actually had quite high hopes for this car, because from what I remembered from past Gran Turismo games, it was a really good rally car. But on GT6, it just doesn't perform as well as it looks, or as on paper you'd think it would. Because at the end of the day, it is a powerful car, it looks the part, it has plenty of grip, and it's a hugely popular car. But it just doesn't achieve what you'd think and hope that it would achieve. Now, overall, its worst point is definitely how heavy the steering is. Now, you can, of course, adjust that and improve that with varying settings of the differential, gearbox and weight distribution. But overall, there are certain characteristics of cars that you just can't change. It's an innate part of that car's build. And this car has that as one of its innate characteristics. It is a heavy handling car, and mainly due to that, its lap times are surprisingly short of the mark. As I said in the video, it falls surprisingly far behind many of the modern WRCs that have significantly less power. It's even slower than some rally cars that weigh significantly more, which is a shame. Now, overall, its best point, I would say, is its straight line performance. Because if you do get this car on a more open track against other rally cars, its straight line performance and power do give it an upper hand to most rally cars, because it is very quick in a straight line. Now, overall, I would recommend this car, and I would recommend it. It's certainly not a useless car. I would recommend it to people who are more fans of retro rally cars, because if you're a fan of old school rally cars, this is one of the best that you can get of the older generation that isn't, say, a Group B Evolution model, because obviously they're good because of the amount of crazy kit that those cars have. But if you're looking for a more normal level retro rally car, this is pretty much the best one of that class. Now, it is an expensive car. 1.4 million is a lot for a car that falls behind most of its rivals. So if you're looking for a car purely for its winning potential, to be honest, I would not recommend the Starion. If you're looking for something that's just a nice collector's piece, however, then I would recommend it. So, as always, I will put this car's ratings, lap times and specs in the video description for you to compare it to the other rally cars of the series if you need to. And as always, thanks for watching.